There are cases where the evidence exists, the timelines are clear, and the bodies were found, yet nothing truly adds up. Somewhere, someone out there knows what happened. But in these cases, that knowledge was buried by fear, by silence, and by time itself. These are 5 disturbing mysteries that still make no sense and may never will. The Boy in the Box. For more than 65 years, America was haunted by the image of a small, unidentified boy found dead in a cardboard box on the outskirts of Philadelphia. On 25th of February 1957, the naked body of a young boy was discovered in a wooded area of Susquehanna Road in Philadelphia's Fox Chase neighborhood. His body had been wrapped in a blanket and placed in a cardboard box that once held a baby bassinet. The boy showed signs of severe malnourishment, and there was evidence of prolonged physical abuse, and the official cause of death was blunt force trauma. Yet, despite the violence he had suffered, something about the scene stood in stark contrast. In a disturbing contradiction, the boy's body had been cleaned, his fingernails were neatly trimmed, and his hair had been freshly cut. It was as if someone had tried to make him presentable before they abandoned him entirely. Police expected that the boy would be identified quickly, but things were far more complex than they initially seemed. More than 400,000 flyers bearing his likeness were printed and distributed across Philadelphia, and they were included with every gas bill in the city. The area where he was discovered was searched again and again. Clothing and personal items believed to be connected to him were recovered, but none led to meaningful answers. No one came forward to claim him, and there were no missing child reports that could match his description. The boy eventually became known simply as America's unknown child. Over the decades, multiple theories would emerge. A nearby foster home was linked as they used similar bassinets and blankets that the boy was discovered with. A woman known as Martha, or M, who accused her mentally ill mother of killing a boy she claimed was purchased illegally, and a theory suggesting that the child may have been raised as a girl based on their unusual grooming details. But every lead either collapsed under scrutiny or reached a dead end, and eventually the case would go cold. In 2022, advancements in genetic genealogy testing would finally deliver a breakthrough in the case. The boy would be identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born on 13th of January 1953. His biological parents were also identified, though they had already been long deceased. Joseph was found to have living half-siblings, people who never knew that he existed. For the first time in history, the boy had a name, but the mystery surrounding his death was far from being solved. Philadelphia police have made one thing clear. This case is still an open homicide investigation. The Severed Feet Mystery. The beaches around the Salish Sea, stretching between Western Canada and Washington State, are known for their natural beauty. Shells, sea glass, and driftwood wash ashore, but starting in 2007, something far more sinister began appearing. It began on 20th of August when a 12-year-old girl on Jedediah Island discovered a blue and white running shoe, and inside of that running shoe was a human foot. Within a week, a second foot appeared on Gabriola Island. Both were right feet and were in different shoes. Over the following years, more than 20 feet would be washed ashore. Almost all were in tennis shoes, with some in hiking boots. Theories ran wild online, with many people suspecting serial killers, plane crashes, and drowned migrants. But investigators assigned to the case would turn to science. Dead bodies that enter water generally sink over time, and marine scavengers like lobsters and crabs can quickly disarticulate bodies. Feet, in particular, could detach naturally. Modern tennis shoes are buoyant and tough, which allow them to drift with currents towards the shore. Oceanography confirmed the Salish Sea's currents and prevailing winds made it the perfect pathway for detached feet. A foot in a shoe could float for months, carried eastward, eventually washing ashore, often far from where the person entered the water. DNA analysis provided the final, tragic answers. Most feet belong to missing persons, lost to accidents or by taking their own lives, some missing for years. No foul play, no serial killer, just the cold, relentless logic of decomposition, scavengers, and ocean currents. The mystery of the Salish Sea feet remain eerie reminders of lives cut short, drifting silently until they meet the shore. Science solved the mystery, but the image of these solitary severed feet, washed clean on quiet beaches, lingers in the mind long after. The probability of finding just 2 feet in the same body of water has been guessed at 1,000,000 to 1 odds. The chances of finding over 20 are infinitesimally slim. Every identified foot came with an explanation that made sense on its own, but when taken together, the deeply unsettling phenomenon still doesn't. The Somerton Man. On the evening of 30th of November 1948, a well-dressed man was seen lying against a seawall on Somerton Beach just south of Adelaide. Several passers-by noticed him but assumed he was drunk or asleep. By the following morning, it became clear that the man was dead. He showed no visible signs of violence, had no identification, and carried only a few mundane items: tickets, cigarettes, gum, combs, and matches. Every label had been carefully removed from his clothing. However, on his tie read the name T. Keane. No missing person at the time with that name matched. An autopsy revealed disturbing abnormalities. His organs were severely congested, and his spleen was unusually enlarged, and there was blood in his stomach, suggesting poisoning. Yet, extensive chemical testing found no trace of any toxin. Experts theorized that an extremely rare poison, possibly strophanthin or digitalis, had been used, substances that could decompose rapidly after death. Despite this, no cause of death was ever determined. The man's body exhibited other peculiar traits. His calf muscles were exceptionally developed, and his toes were wedge-shaped, leading some to speculate that he may have been a dancer. His fingerprints were circulated internationally with no match. With no answers, police buried the body in a concrete sealed grave, preserving the possibility of exhumation. Weeks later, a breakthrough emerged. A suitcase found at Adelaide's railway station contained clothing, tools, and a distinctive orange thread that matched a repair on the man's trousers. Some items in the suitcase bore the name T. Keane. Still, no missing person by the same name had been reported. Then, in April of 1949, a hidden pocket was discovered in the man's trousers. Inside was a scrap of paper bearing the words Tamam Shud, Persian for "it is finished." The phrase was traced to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. It would be months later before a man came forward with a copy of the book found in his car near Somerton Beach. The final page had been torn out, matching the scrap found on the body. Inside the book was a mysterious series of letters, apparently a code, and an unlisted phone number belonging to a local nurse named Jessica Thompson. Thompson admitted giving a Rubaiyat to a man named Alfred Boxall during the war, but Boxall was later found alive and still in possession of his intact book. When shown a cast of the Somerton Man's face, Thompson appeared deeply shaken but denied knowing him. The code has never been deciphered. For decades, theories flourished: spy, smuggler, ballet dancer, spurned lover, but nothing ever came of them. Then, in 2021, the remains of the Somerton Man were exhumed. Hair samples were collected and analysed to build a family tree via genealogical DNA databases. Fortunately, one genetic match was identified, relating to a man named Thomas Keane. After further analysis, it would be determined that Thomas Keane was married to the Somerton Man's sister. The Somerton Man could then be identified as Carl Webb, a Melbourne engineer with a troubled past and a fascination with death. While the South Australian Police have acknowledged the finding, official confirmation is still pending. Though a name may finally exist, many questions remain unanswered. How did Webb die? Why did his belongings contain so many strange items? and what truly happened on Somerton Beach. The mystery, though narrowed, endures. The Isdal Woman. On 29th of November 1970, a father and his 2 daughters were hiking through the Isdal Valley near Bergen, Norway. Some locals call it Ice Valley, others call it Death Valley. It's a place known for its heavy fog, freezing temperatures, and history of suicides in the Middle Ages and more recent hiking accidents. That day, the family were expecting an ordinary hike, but instead they came across the charred body of a woman. She was laying among rocks and ash in a remote corner of the valley. She was partially burned, completely erasing her fingerprints. Her face had also been destroyed beyond recognition. Whoever she was, it had appeared as though her identity had been deliberately removed. The woman was estimated to be between 25 to 40 years old, about 164 centimeters or around 5 foot 5 inches tall, with dark brown hair. She carried no form of identification, but she did have multiple disguises, including wigs and clothing, with every label carefully cut away. Around the body lay empty liquor bottles, dozens of sleeping pills, scattered jewellery, and plastic containers used to carry accelerants. It was determined that the fire had been set after her death. Her autopsy would go on to reveal that she had died from carbon monoxide poisoning and an overdose of pills. Norwegian police now had a Jane Doe who appeared to have planned this outcome long in advance. Tracing her movements through hotel records revealed that she had extensively travelled across Norway and Europe in the weeks before her death. She always travelled alone, always paid in cash, and always used fake names. At least 9 aliases were confirmed, each supported by believable details. Her appearance, wigs, mannerisms, and even her accent changed constantly. Witnesses couldn't agree where she was from. The woman was understood to be polylingual and was able to speak Norwegian, German, French, and Flemish, but she never did so consistently. Days before her death, she checked into a hotel in Bergen under the name Vanilla Lodge. She would stay for only 1 night, checking out early the following day, leaving most of her belongings behind. 2 suitcases belonging to the woman were later found at the Bergen railway station. Inside were more wigs, clothing with the labels removed, foreign currency, and a notebook filled with coded writing. The codes were never fully deciphered. Norwegian banknotes found in her possession had sequential serial numbers, suggesting a single source. She also carried a large amount of German marks and Swiss francs. For someone who did not officially exist, she was well funded. By this point, police no longer viewed the case as ordinary. Bergen was a strategic NATO port during the Cold War, and the woman's behaviour mirrored known intelligence tradecraft. Multiple identities, cash-only travel, coded notes, constant movement, and avoidance of surveillance. The official ruling was, quote, probably suicide, but the details did not sit comfortably. Her body appeared to have been moved. Her boots and umbrella were placed neatly away from her, and no suicide note was found. The fire seemed as though it was designed to destroy evidence. Witnesses also reported seeing her with a man shortly before her death, but after the body was discovered, he vanished. Decades later, isotope analysis suggested that she grew up near Nuremberg, possibly moving to France later in life, but DNA testing had not found any matches. More than 50 years on, the case remains open. The Isdal Woman is still unidentified, and perhaps that was always the intention. The Cleveland Torso Murders. Between 1935 and 1938, the city of Cleveland, Ohio, was terrorized by a serial killer who was never caught. They would become known as the Cleveland Torso Murderer by some and the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run by others. At least 12 victims were officially attributed to the killer, though some investigators believe that the true number may be far higher. Most of the victims were decapitated, while some of them were suspected to have been dismembered while still alive. But as suddenly as the killings began, they stopped. To this day, nobody has ever been convicted of the crimes. The murders centered around Kingsbury Run, a dark, prehistoric riverbed cutting through the city. In the 1930s, it was a wasteland of shantytowns, filth, and transient camps. Nearby was the roaring 3rd Precinct, which was known for its brothels, gambling dens, and bars. This is the location where the bodies would begin to appear. In September of 1934, a woman's torso washed up along Lake Erie. Her skin had been treated with chemicals that turned it red and leathery. Her head would never be discovered, and she would later become known as the Lady of the Lake. A year later, the bodies of 2 men who had been decapitated and emasculated with surgical precision were discovered at Kingsbury Run. In January of 1936, the dismembered remains of a woman were found packed neatly into baskets and wrapped in newspaper. Then, the killings accelerated. A tattooed man was found headless. His death mask was displayed publicly to more than 100,000 people, but he was never recognized. Other victims would follow, with their bodies dumped near rail lines, rivers, and bridges. Some were gutted, some showed signs of refrigeration, and nearly all were never identified. By late 1936, Cleveland was gripped by fear. The newspapers ran daily headlines, and the killer would be dubbed the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. Over the years, thousands of people were questioned. In 1939, a man named Frank Dolezal was arrested for one of the killings. His confession was erratic and contradictory. Before his trial, he was found dead in his cell by his own hand. However, his autopsy would reveal that he also had 6 broken ribs. Not many people believed that he was the killer. Privately, a man named Elliot Ness believed he knew who was responsible for the murders. A troubled surgeon simply known as Dr. X, who was widely believed to be Francis E. Sweeney, though this has never been officially confirmed. He had the anatomical skill and lived near Kingsbury Run. Dr. X was interrogated for days but never confessed. However, immediately after the interrogation, he committed himself to a sanatorium, and after that, the murders stopped. All official case files have either been lost, destroyed, or removed. The Cleveland torso murders remain unsolved, a series of precision killings buried beneath a city that chose to move on.